Hey, good morning, Grace Church. So good to be with you again. Thanks for taking the time to watch this devotional. I'm so grateful for all of our staff at Grace taking the time each week to put our devotionals together to encourage you as our church family. I think we're in our 20th week of devotionals already, if you can believe that. Hard to believe it's been that long already. For my devotional today, I want to take us to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, this passage. And I want to read um, the first uh, 7 verses. Let me read that with you. Therefore, having this ministry by the mercy of God, we do not lose heart. But we have renounced disgraceful, underhanded ways. We refuse to practice cunning or to tamper with God's word, but by the open statement of the truth, we would commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled only to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. I was watching a DVD last week and it was about the Exodus and the archaeological evidence for the biblical account of God delivering the nation of Israel from slavery. Archaeologists date the various dig sites that they're at based on the type of artifacts that they dig up, like pottery or like weapons or tools. And as I was watching that DVD and thinking about that, it reminded me of this passage that I just read here in 2 Corinthians 4 about how Paul describes us as jars of clay, just ordinary people uh, that is like ordinary pottery in a sense that's used every day. What a great illustration of how God uses us as individuals, ordinary people like you and me, to share the message of the gospel to those around us. We are God's jars of clay, in a sense, vessels for God's purposes. And Paul tells us here that God made his light to shine in our hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. That's the treasure part. That's the treasure that's in us as jars of clay. And so God has entrusted us with this incredible message of hope and salvation that He has given us, in a sense, uh, this message of reconciliation as fragile people. The question I used to wonder, though, is how does light shine out from inside a jar of clay? Have you ever thought about that when you read this passage? Well, then a number of years ago, I remember being enlightened. I can't recall if it was something that I read from someone or if it was something someone's talking on a Christian radio station about this passage. But the insight itself really stuck with me. And that's this: as fragile vessels living in a with a broken sinful nature that we are prone to develop cracks in this vessel that's us. Or in other circumstances, hardships or difficult times come upon us, or tragedy strikes, and we begin to crack under the pressures of life. But isn't it just in those moments when cracks start to develop that the light of Jesus inside of us can then shine through those cracks to those around us? That's our testimony of how we deal with these cracks that develop, those difficult times, those times when we fail, those times when we really mess up. It's a testimony of how we can lean on God, how we can rely on Him to give us strength, to help us persevere, to give us peace and comfort, even as those cracks begin to grow in us. That we allow His light that's living in us to shine through us into the lives of those around us, to see Christ living in us and how that helps us to get through those difficult times that cause these cracks to appear. Maybe for you, this COVID pandemic has been one of those cracks that has developed in and started to grow in you as God's jar of clay. Well, let me encourage you not to allow it to break you, but to allow God's light to shine through you, through those difficult cracks in your life, and allow people to see Jesus at work and how he gives you strength and endurance and patience and peace to be able to get through those difficult times. You know, God has given us this treasure. Let's allow his light to shine through us, especially through the cracks themselves, so that others will want to come to know Jesus, whom we have a relationship with, and they will want to have that relationship too. Well, I hope that's a good challenge for you for this week, and that it also encourages you to know that you are God's vessel and you have this treasure in you that he wants you to share with others. So God's blessing on you in the rest of this week, and we look forward to seeing you again this time.